Welcome to today's episode of the Indoencers podcast. Our guest today is an incredible violinist and composer, known for the way in which he uniquely integrates Western harmonic concepts with the melodic and rhythmic complexities of Carnatic music. Having started her journey under Lalgudi Srimati Brahmandam and Srimati Anuradha Sridhar, she has not only established herself as a top-class Carnatic violinist, but her work infusing musical genres from all over the world has won her admirers like the legendary Shankar Mahadevan-ji, the one and only John McLaughlin-ji, among many other esteemed artists. Her latest and first fusion album, titled Intuition, is filled with innovative and explorative compositions that truly do stretch the boundaries of music itself. To talk about her musical journey till date, I'm joined by the incredible violinist and composer, Apoorva Krishna. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so happy to be here today.
So, I want to take it right back, as we tend to do on this podcast, and sort of trace your journey to where you are
Absolutely.
today. And of course, at the end, we'll talk a lot about your new album. But just to
Okay.
sort of start from the beginning,
Mhm.
music is something that runs in your family, starting from your great grandfather through your grandmother, plus your parents as well. So, as a result of having music all around you, do you think music was something you were immediately inclined to, even in your early days?
Yep, for sure. I think it kind of was something that happened to me whether I liked it or not because it was all over the house. It was everywhere. My mom sings, my father is a percussionist, my grandmother is a Carnatic vocalist, Shrimati Shakuntala Murthy, and her father, Shri S. Rajagopala Iyer, he is a big musicologist, and he wrote a book on Laya intricacies. And, I think it's come from the family, and I've been kind of exposed to Carnatic music, especially ever since I was born. So I think it's because it's come from the family more than, anything else. Yeah.
I mean, evidently, there were sort of signs of your sort of musical geniusness even early on. Yeah, I read that at the age of 3, you were playing tunes just by ear on the piano, despite not receiving formal training. So, was
Yeah.
that sort of realization always there within the family? That okay, like she's in it for
Yeah.
music.
I think so. I mean, I remember, people telling me that apparently I used to just, pick up just songs and, play them on the piano without having practiced any, like just suddenly just playing, the same tune, kind of figuring it out a little bit for like a minute and then just playing it all, just kind of knowing the basic note positions and then just playing along. And I think that's when they realized that I have some sort of like a grasping ability and just that I'm able to just it has to do with intuition, right? And how, instinct and all of that. So I think that's where they realized that it was naturally kind of coming to me, and that's how it kind of started. And they were all always, singing around me and playing music, so I was listening to music all the time, whether I liked it or not, all the time. Actually, when I say all the time, I mean all the time. And I think listening to Carnatic music when you're really, really young helps a lot because you're used to those sounds and those microtones and those movements, note wise and everything wise. And so, of course, that's not something I was able to play on the piano because linear notes.
Yeah.
But I think it slowly, would sing along and kind of, really relate to what is going on. So I think that's how it kind of started.
You were born and brought up in the Bay Area in California, and as much as you say right now that you were surrounded by Carnatic music and you started learning Carnatic vocals and violin from a very young age, this is California, which has a completely different, local music culture. So, do you think you ever took in the sort of Western music culture that's home to California, or was it just basically the Carnatic music within the household?
It was surprisingly no, I didn't, learn Western music or any, Suzuki, like nothing at all. It was just, I we went to Livermore Temple, and that's where I heard Srimati Anuradha Sridhar, my guru, playing a solo concert, and that's when I was really really young, and I remember like my parents telling me that I was pointing at the violin, and that's when they kind of thought that okay, I think they thought I was fascinated and that I really wanted to kind of. That's when we went to her house, I think the next day or the next week, and my violin and vocal lessons actually, form like it started from then on. But yeah, I didn't have time to do Western music because I'd go to school and then I'd immediately go for class or to practice at an auntie's house, and I also did Bharatanatyam classes too. So I think with all of that, it was hard to kind of. And I came back to India when I was in the sixth grade, right? So by then, we didn't even have like a band sort of class or music, thing in school. Otherwise, probably I would have done something at school at least. But no, I didn't have the time for it, and but I'd listen a little bit. And I think the past few kind of the past few years have been more of a big exposure when it comes to kind of listening to not just listening to but also like playing with other styles of music, and getting diving deeper into that space. So it's funny that yeah, even though I was born and raised over there, it wasn't really much of a I guess I just didn't have time, or I was just, my headspace was totally here the whole time.
Was there ever that culture clash when you were in the States? And did you ever have like a conscious feeling that you had to hide the sort of Indian Carnatic-ness in you from like the more American like school or like friend group or whatever?
I hate to say this, but I don't even think I had any like friends back then. Like, I mean, because it was just school and then practice, and then I mean, I had friends from like my music classes and my dance. Like, I think more than I had a couple friends from school, but it wasn't like I couldn't connect beyond a certain point because my life was just like different, right? And so yeah, there was I felt for a while like it was hard to kind of keep switching, right? But I think I felt more home to this side of things. But you know, certain things like the food, the accent, like food. I love every type of like that was fine. It wasn't but I think just kind of the whole yeah, the dual like shift right between the two worlds. Like I think that was it took a while to understand that it's going to be like this, and it's you can't do anything about it. And I think I that's why I connected to people who were also from music class or were also kind of in the same zone. And when I moved to India, that was hard too because it was like Indians there are so different from Indians here. Like not, just generally, right? When I went to school and like it took a while to kind of really connect. But then once I did, it was great. Like it was better than anything else. Like that's I started to feel really like, oh, now I really have great friends like who like can really understand what I'm talking about. Um, because there was so much in common, so much even if I'm bringing like idli to school, people know what I'm doing. Like it's not like so and even like listening to so many concerts here and just making so many more like music friends, and just the community here also really I felt so loved in so many ways. So I feel like I don't know. It's and then I kept going to the U.S. to kind of do concerts there every year, especially the Cleveland Tyagaraja Aradhana, right? So I would keep going every year, or even for other concerts, this or that, and then I started getting like that gap between the two, like it wasn't that bad, I started getting used to kind of both sides of things. And it's even today it's funny because I'm just still conscious about the way I'm like my accent and my like because I can totally switch, right? And there's this mix in me for everything I do, right? And I even in the music and in the person and the but I'm dealing with it slowly and yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm too Indian for America and I'm too American for India and it's just then I did my master's in Spain, so I'm like everywhere. But anyway, I'm just gonna think I'm like this global citizen who's just yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, you referenced it, but you moved to India when you were 12. And often when speaking about Indian families and pursuing music, there's a sort of negative correlation that's placed on it.
Hmm.
As
Right.
understandably, there is hesitation for parents to have their kids in an industry where income is not guaranteed by any means. But
Yeah.
your family was pretty much on the opposite end of the spectrum, as I
Yeah.
understand it. And yeah, as we just said, you moved to Bangalore when you were 12
Hmm.
to help you gain more exposure to the Carnatic world. So,
Yeah.
was this something that you were insistent on, either implicitly or explicitly? Like, was it the case that you were practicing so much and were so involved with the music at such a young age that you sort of outgrew the capabilities of what the Bay Area was able to provide? Or was it more a move made by your parents with the future in sight?
Yeah. I think it was the second. And so basically, I was used to, I practiced, music all the time, or I was listening to it. I was, in it so much that it wasn't really like I was there was never this sort of feeling of, whether like financially it'll like I never used to even like think of things like that as in like, you know, I I didn't even think of doing something else. I was in there was school, there was, I did my um bachelor's in business administration and everything. But like because music was such a prominent part of my life, traveling and playing concerts or competitions or just, class and whatever it is, right? I kind of always knew that it'll just be what I'm gonna do forever and as my main thing. And even at home, there was no conversation or, what do you want to do? That's just stupid having that sort of a conversation. Oh, you're done with your bachelor's, or what do you want to do now? Do you want to like do a 9 to 5? No, like because maybe this is all I know, and maybe I think that's because this is all I've done all my life, and um, you know, I think luckily there was no, conversation where we were like, oh, but I mean, risk will always be there, but it's just about, doing it if you love it, and, there's always a way to, figure it out. And I think I'm just grateful that have to go the engineering and the medical, like, because it's not that's not my passion. And about like the move, that initially I think was that definitely was my parents. Like they were sure to want to kind of come here and you know provide me like an environment where I can play more and you know just get into it more. Being around musicians here too, and like kind of also getting the best of both worlds in a lot of ways, right? And that's when I kind of started competing in a lot of competitions and learning so much and jamming with so many other musician friends and accompanying a lot of artists. Like concerts happen all the time, right? So playing more and more and more and just like learning more, and that gave me a lot of exposure. um, you know and I think, and also listening to my friends perform, and it's just like a lot more experience and exposure. That's what kind of helped me kind of grow, along with my classes and everything, which I took online because I came here, right? So I then continued learning from Anu Auntie's mom, Lalgudi Srimati Mami, from Chennai, and so I would go to Chennai initially, and kind of then we continued, on Skype and everything, and that's when I started also slowly playing in the December music, Margari festival, all concerts there, and lots of things started happening, here, Ramanavami and Dasara and then December and, frequent concerts and just a lot of opportunity to listen a lot too, right? So be it, concerts, lectums, um, supporting your like your friends and like, I think that's what really got me liking it more. That's how, yeah, that's what happened when I came here. Yeah.
And you mentioned your gurus, and your gurus obviously play an incredibly important role in any artist's journey, and particularly the case within the Carnatic realm. And you had the opportunity to learn under Lalgudi Srimati Brahmandam, sister of the legendary violinist Sri Lalgudi Jayaraman, and later with her daughter, Srimati Anuradha Sridhar. And I've read that the Lalgudi musical education is something particularly unique, as it's not only conducted with a high level of rigor, but there's also an emphasis on developing vocal and compositional skill as well. So could you tell us more and just speak on your experience learning from such esteemed gurus?
I think something that's the most special, you know, fact is that um, I I was not allowed to play anything on the violin unless I sing, before, and I learn the song completely. Like I know the words, I know the meaning, I know, um, I'm able to sing it and not just sing it, but sing it well. And like, once that happens, then you move on to the violin and then you apply it there and you feel it more because you know what you're doing and you know what, you're able to express better and you're able to, emote and, what it means, you basically, so they're very, particular on you kind of being able to sing what you're playing because it's not just like da da da, it's like you need to make your violin like try and sing the song and the everything. And so that's one thing that was so special because one, it honed my like vocal skills, and also like it was, really makes you dive deeper into the composition, right? Because it's not just, a bunch of notes, right? It's much like it's all the sahityam and the meaning and the, where the composer came from when he was, composing this and all the syllables. And you have to make sure that when you're bowing, you're bowing the right syllables. You're not, if you're playing Mari Vere, you're not going to do Mari, you're going to do Mari Vere, right? So you're making your violin really sing and speak, and that's what was most, special. And I always remember, we had a lot of, Lyam exercises and classes and, playing, practicing speed, practicing so many raga exercises, practicing like a bunch of doing rounds and rounds and rounds of kalpana swarams, like just never stop it, like all of these experiences, like they're just priceless, that sort of like that sort of intense practice that Anwanti really, like, she would pick me up from school and um, you know um, I would have to start like practicing all day. And even like I remember for so many competitions or whatever, like the training and the practice, and we'd it was so intense, right? Like basically, like that's all that I remember doing all day long. Like even at school, that would be running in my head. That's why I got so, served as this fundamental base, right? Without which, like, nothing else is, possible in terms of getting that strong grip on layam and, practicing so many things like speed and, expression and raga exercises and the songs and the, like, oh my God, it was so intense that, um, I'm sure like all Carnatic musicians will really like relate to what I'm saying, but yeah, it was a I remember with Mami, like there was one song that I was learning called Chakani Raja, and we almost did the song for about 6 weeks, um, because we went into each and every detail of every line, and we didn't want to go to the next, like she didn't want us to go to the next line. Of course, I was like, mommy, can we go to the next line? But then she wants it to be really like, on point, and like even if we do like two lines in like, for the whole class, like 1 hour class, that's it. Those two lines should be like, done with all perfection. And so they're so meticulous, and it's beautiful how they um, every curve, every movement, between notes, and amazing, really.
You mentioned school slightly. I know the school sort of made efforts to help you in your Carnatic journey, and they, I believe, they'd sort of help you catch up on work if you had to go for concerts or things like that. But was there any sort of facet where school aided your musical development through, certain activities or things like that? Or was it just a matter of them getting out of the way as much as possible?
I think more than school, when I came to India, college, my 3 year undergrad, time doing business, I think they were really, really like supportive when it came, because that was the time where I really, I was performing a lot, and I was, starting to kind of, um, I was hardly, I didn't even go, right, half the time. So, and I think when I first, I spoke to them, and that's when we, mentioned that, my passion is music, and, I'm here because I also love, learning all of this stuff, but I know that this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. And, I think like a lot of people, who are just passionate about different things, but also, it's important to have like a base, education wise, right? I think my principal was used to kind of meeting people who are just really passionate about other things too. And he was really, really supportive, and he said, go for it, just let me know where you're going though, and go for it, and, show me pictures, show me videos, but, be here at least a month before your big tests, like don't,
Yeah.
like, like, and I'd go come, and my teachers they'd know that, oh God, we gotta teach her this whole thing again, but like, it it was, they were sweet enough to kind of, train me, and just, help me. And I think that sort of, well, that was a year where, I had to sacrifice kind of, going out with, college friends. And I think I can remember like three college friends I probably even today speak to, because I didn't have, honestly, the time, right? It would just be concerts, or, learn this stuff now before you fail, or like, that was my life for like those 3 years. But it was, I think it's so important to have that support, because otherwise, if I had to go every day, I wouldn't have been able to get this sort of experience. And that's what I think a lot of these concerts, especially accompanying so many great people, and great musicians, and, that's what gave me also so much insight and exposure, because, it puts me on the spot. It makes me, react quick, and just, you don't have time to think on stage. Like a lot of the times I wouldn't even know what, is going to be performed, and I'd have to just go with whatever, whether I played it like a month ago or 6 months ago. Like you have to just play, and like, and these experiences really like made me keep in touch with, the art form in ways that, sometimes, like when you're practicing, you get to choose what you want to practice, you get to choose what you feel like playing, right? But when you're sometimes on that stage, you have to just play, whether you want to or whether you know what you're gonna do. Like you have to just do it, and that's what made me work on, being, quick when it comes to responses, and, alert, and, learn also so much in the process, right? Because you have to listen, and like, kind of react, and And it's a teamwork thing, right? So everyone's learning from everyone, and it's all of these things were great experiences from school. I mean, I'm really also happy that I did business administration, because there were so many things that I learned that helped me even, like, in my life, and even as a musician. And you know being a musician takes a lot in terms of, you're not just doing music, right? You have to be a one-man show in terms of your marketing, your everything. You're managing your finances, you're, literally HR, like looking at the whole thing. You need to take care of so many things, right? So I think that was a great course for me to kind of learn and understand so many things. So I think it's all in all been a good decision.
Yeah, so after you completed your undergrad degree in business administration, you attended a 5-week summer course at the Berklee College of Music. And I've read that this is the sort of turning point, as it had a significant impact on your musical journey, and it sort of took you out of the musical bubble that you felt you were in. Could you just talk us through like how transformative this experience was for you, and in what ways it really shaped how you looked at music?
Yeah, I think, oh my God, it was that experience that changed a lot of, the way I looked at so many things. Because it's funny that I, went there and everyone's like, "Oh, where did you grow up? Where are you from?" I'm like, "Oh, I was in the Bay Area." And they're like, "And you only know Indian music?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, this is the first time you're listening to other stuff." And then I'm like, "Yeah," and that's why it was that, eye-opening sort of thing. And then later, that's when I started actually playing their music. And that experience was not fusing what I know with what it was, just playing their, like, the whole this whole other, world of things, right? And that's I remember, like, walking out of classes crying, because I it was, you're coming from a whole other, it's a whole other thing, right? You're not looking at um Sarigama Danisa anymore. You're not. And you're looking at jazz, you're looking at these other vibes, right? Like funk and like, like all of that was so different, because I was like, wow. I was so, like, fascinated, but it was just so frustrating that, you know, I couldn't, like, play anything. But I wanted to. And I realized how many other worlds there are out there, right? And it's not just what we think. Like, sometimes we just think that, I don't know if anybody else, but at least me, like, when I was learning so much Carnatic music, I was like, wow, there's no other art that's this complicated, or there's nothing else that's this, because it's so deep, and there's so much, math to it, and so many ragams, and so many vivadi things, and so many like, it's so, which it is. But when I saw, like, these other things too, like, I was like, wow, like, it's not just us. It's not just us, right? And, like, that was what it was there. And it's the first time I was listening to all these different instruments, and, like, big arrangements, and big, like, not just casually, but going there and being like, wow, let me try playing this, and then realizing that it's not a joke. Like, it's not a joke. And that's when, I had to play and do, like, a couple ensembles. And that's when I got into, I had to play some rock, I had to play some funk fusion, I had to play some jazz, I had to play some blues, I had to play some, like, bluegrass. I had to play all sorts of things. And I was in a Middle Eastern ensemble too, and Balkan ensemble. We played Balkan music. It was crazy. It was amazing. And I think it was, that's what really opened my eyes, and it just made me realize that, oh my, and I just loved it so much that I was like, wow, I really want to learn all of this. Like, if not even learn everything, just I want to be a part of these worlds in some way too, and just listen to all of these things, and get inspired by all of this. And and that's also when a lot of people for the first time heard Carnatic music as well, right? A lot of people, like, it was the first time they heard stuff coming from our roots and everything, and they were like also like, wow, what is this, like, you're not, it's a pentatonic, it's the same scale, but what are you doing with these micro, like, how are you
Yeah.
doing this? And I'd be like, no, this is just Mohanam, it's just, and they're like, what?
Wait till you're
Right.
done in the baby.
I know, right? And so literally, like, but that's what really was so beautiful, because they were so accepting, and I also loved all of that. And then I realized that it's possible to kind of come together in some way, obviously not maybe, 100%, but being with each other that's beautiful too, right? Than just being in our own worlds only all the time. So that's what that experience really just taught me. Yeah.
Was there any part of you that sort of struggled to take in the other worlds? Because, when you're so deeply involved into one world and you've been surrounded by just that, was there any part of you that sort of rejected in any way, or were you immediately open to all of the other forms of music?
I think I didn't feel rejected, but I felt so mad at myself because um, I was like, why can't I do this, or why can't I get this? Like, why? Like, but then I realized, like, no, it's not easy, because I'm reading notation, and like I don't have standard tuning coming from, Indian Carnatic world, and
Mm.
like everybody else does. That's why when they read an A, they know they play an A. When I read an A, I don't know what's my A, because I don't know what's my sa, and there's
Yeah.
no sa here, because it was so messed up initially, right? And I had to figure all this out on my own for a while, because I didn't even know what question to ask anyone, right? Because if I at least know what to ask, then I can figure out a solution, right? I am trying to figure out what's the question. And I think all of that happened. I should have done some homework before, but this was a quick decision to just go. And yeah, that's why I was kind of initially frustrated, because like people were like, "Can you tell me what's, because they're not going to understand what I'm saying either, because it's
Mm.
not like they're used to this world of things, right?" But then, when I really sat down, the first I'd say like 4 or 5 days it was tough, because of all of these feelings. And also that was the first time I lived alone too. Like I didn't, yeah. So that with this, and oh my God. And I was like, I thought I was such a mess, and I didn't even know what to say to anyone for a while. And then after that, I sat down with a few of my teachers, and I was like, I want to just explain to you where I'm coming from. And then we can figure out the questions that I have so that we can figure out how to kind of work towards, getting somewhere in the middle, right? And but just calmly sitting down, and that's when they explained to me that we're all really coming from different parts of the world, and like in terms of everything musically, place wise, everything wise. And like they said, it's totally, we'll figure it out and everything. And that's when I started to that trip made me realize what it is that I need to do, or what, like, to also kind of start, getting, into these spaces, and trying to just understand how they understand things, right? And that's how, like, that trip was kind of more about that, as well as playing with them, and just vibing with them, and just letting out that feeling of oh my God, I'm never gonna be able to do this. I'm never gonna, like, that happened in the, like, I think first week or like 10 days. And then after that, it was more about, okay, it is what it is, but you know, um, I love this, and like if I love it, I'm gonna figure out a way to, like, it's just I wanted everything quick. I think that was the problem, because when I went there, I listened to everything, and I'm like, oh my God, now I want to know all of this right now so I can play, right? But then it became like I calmed down, and I was like, okay, there's a whole life to, like, do this, like, and yeah. But it was really beautiful, and just listening to so many amazing musicians, man. Like I can't even tell you. And it was so beautiful that they loved, Carnatic music too. Like they were listening. I played in a class. I remember one class I played. The last 5 minutes of a particular class, like everyone wanted me to play a different rag and show them like the same 7 notes, like plain, and then the same 7 notes, with argamakams, right? So I'd be like, okay, this is Shankarabharanam, and then I'd play our Shankarabharanam. They'd be like, no, right? And I'd
It's
be
not a
like,
major
yeah,
scale.
yeah. That's not even, yeah. And then I went to like Todi and like all these other ragams, and they were like, you got to be like, but, and then I started making friends, and I think the whole thing, like, it took a few, I'd say 2 weeks, right? Then after that, it was really nice because I started understanding their language, and I was able to communicate my doubts or whatever I didn't understand, and I wasn't shy anymore to be like, what is that, like? And then they would be like, oh, this means this, and then I'd be like, oh, okay, and then I'd have a small book to say this is equal to this, right? And I'd I try and, there was no one way of being like, oh, if I do this, then I'll, because, so I kept trying to find, my way through that whole, 5 weeks. And then later, it got, yeah, better.
Yeah, and that soon led to your master's degree, I believe, at Berklee College of Music at the Valencia campus in Spain.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so at this point, what skills, you said you sort of realized at the summer course that there were certain skills you were lacking and certain skills that, you had really mastered, and there was this really big discrepancy. At the
Yeah.
point where you were enrolling into your master's degree, where do you think you were in terms of your ability, and like what sort of holes were you trying to cover?
Um, I think by then because so I took a year, to kind of really soak things in for a while, and then I went. So there was a whole year after the summer program, and then I went to Valencia. And so in that year, I think listening more and just kind of, because I listened to just one thing all my life, right? So, spending some time to listen to other things too and just feel connected naturally, by just listening to other things. And I think those things kind of helped me. And I think so. I also started composing. I forgot to kind of mention this, but I think that year, right before Valencia, is when I started to kind of, compose music and, Carnatic. I made a couple tilanas, and I, released my first album, called Apoorva Tilanas. I released 5 tilanas, and then I there was a project. So there was a grant that I received called the Young Artist Grant, from Tarisio London, which is a string auction house, based in London, and so they give out like grants to like 5 upcoming young artists, some really nice compositions and stuff. So one of my compositions got selected, and then because of that, I was inspired to, with the grant money, like do a big music video and make another big composition with legendary singer Shankar Mahadevanji. And so that's kind of, that whole year was like a composing year for me. And I think as I slowly got into composing, that's when I started understanding so many things that come from the other worlds. I don't know how to explain, but I think you know what I'm trying to say, right? There's so many little elements that come in when you think of composing a song, not just the melody was always Carnatic until then, obviously, but just kind of understanding that, oh, there are all these other elements, like there is I like frequencies, like I'd slowly start getting into, oh, okay, I want something low, oh, okay, a bass guitar, oh, so that's what, like, so then I started kind of putting things together, and not like with some sort of formal training, right? But just by listening to other songs and understanding that, oh, there's a reason why this instrument is filling up right here in this song, or there's a, like, so these things kind of started coming in, and that's when I naturally started wanting to implement all these other things into my music. And that's when I started to realize that, why, like, try and just like, let's go into it, and that's when I realized that, I love composing too, and I want to kind of get into these other worlds and bring everything together, and everything's just one, actually, if you look at it all. And that's when I realized I wanted to dive deeper into everything and go and do my masters. And honestly, initially, I didn't know what I was gonna, like, we had to do a big like project, right? and it could be a thesis, it could be an album, it could be a performance, it could be like, it's called a culminating experience, it's called a CE, right? So I, like, when I was applying and everything, I knew, I had to, think of what I want to really, really do, like, as my big project. But I had no idea because, for me, initially, I was like, I just want to go learn and I'm gonna figure it out. And so um, that's when, after going in there and then kind of again going through a small dip initially, that's gonna always be there, right? When you're especially like, in the middle of, like, in Valencia, Spain, where really nobody knows anything about Carnatic music unless, Berklee professors or people in Berklee, but apart from, like, outside, it's not very, and so I did feel a little bit like, how am I gonna do this, because I felt like sometimes I felt like this might be impossible, or how am I going to do it, right? But I think for that sort of a feeling, like, what I would like, I think what helped me the most was the community, the teachers, the friends, the students. Like, it was just a class of like 19 people, and um, yeah, and we were like, everybody was just, helping each other and being there for, like, each other. And I learned so much just um, with them, like, through their, they would advise me. And I learned from, like, really, really great professors, like, one-on-ones all the time, and everyone would know where you are, and they would come and they would, whenever you're stuck, they'd come and be like, okay, where are you and I'd start on, that's the best way, I think. I started learning, rather than just looking at a book or going to a class and just like looking at like a whiteboard, right? Like, but actually asking questions and being like, in my world, this is called this and this is how it is, but I'm not able to, like, relate here what is happening, right? And then they'd kind of explain, okay, harmonically, this is the shift, or this is what this word means, or this is what this concept means. And then they would go to a piano and play like 500 examples and be like, now do you hear the difference? And so, because my best friend always was my ear, right? Because, accompanying so much, and like grasping with my ear, because reading for me was not my friend, because, like, I didn't have standard tuning, right? And explaining this concept and so many different concepts, I was trying to, like, make my own little notebook of tips for myself to understand certain terminologies or things. And that's how that helped me compose and communicate what I want in my compositions, right? Or what I like, so many things, right? Because it's important to know how to talk to people in the ways that they would understand, right? When you want to come together, to the same common sort of space, right? So I think that helped me do that. And when I started playing with people, like, actually playing, that's what gave me more ideas, more understanding of, so many different things. And it really, like, that whole year, like, really opened me up, and it exposed me to so many more styles of music, because it was an extensive, like, it was really diving deep into, like, things, right? Like, because the 5 week was just 5 weeks, but this was like a whole year. And we'd go into, class, like, we'd have class at 9 a.m. until like 2 a.m. We'd have recordings, we'd learn about production, we learned some Ableton too. I learned some piano, I learned some harmony, I learned some compositions, stuff. And and then on top of that, I started, creating music, like my own music, and finding my sound, like, all of this happening together. And it was a very hectic year, right? But I think, which is why, like, my classmates and like my teachers, like, all of us, we were like almost like literally like a family, growing together. And I think, like, all of that, like, it's very important to feel comfortable when you're really, like, trying to figure yourself out in front of, like, a bunch of people. And when I say figure yourself, like, literally, like, find yourself, find your sound, and just get out of your comfort zone. And all these things were happening to me. Um, and you know um, it was initially, it was a little hard, and there would be times where, I did really just want to go and listen to a Carnatic concert, like, and just, you know like a live like I came like in December, and I did a lot of concerts, and I kept in touch, and everything was great. But there were some times when I was sitting in the practice room, and I was like, oh, I really kind of miss listening to someone right now. And but then I realized that this time is right now to just learn, right? And just it's you're gonna feel uncomfortable. You're gonna feel, because this is not something you've ever done before, but you're trying to just enjoy. And then I tried to like enjoy the experience more, right? Because time just flies, and I didn't realize that until the last couple months. And then yeah, but it's been, I think that really, I'm so glad I went there. That really gave me so much to learn and listen to, and want to do in life.
Yeah, and you mentioned, working with musicians from different countries, starting from your summer course and also with your master's degree. And this sort of came together with Sanyog, a band which sort of, I believe, initially started off as Bahudari and then added on two other musicians, an Iranian pianist and a Polish saxophonist.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Sanyog conducted a tour in India in 2019. And
yeah,
yeah, this is something that fascinates me a little bit because in India, like fusion, it's there, but I think the kind of fusion that maybe Indians are most accustomed to is like a rock version of Nagumomu or like, some sort of fusion version of Watapi or something like that. So I suppose what people are used to is Carnatic music fused with another sort of mainstream genre. So it's not too jarring for the listener. But
yeah.
when you're bringing Iranian music and Polish music into the mix, suddenly it's a completely different sound that's Indians haven't heard before. So, what was the experience like touring with Sanyog in India, and what was the sort of feedback that you got?
Yeah. So the minute we graduated and everything, that's when I got this concert opportunity to kind of perform in Mumbai in National Center of Performing Arts, NCPA. So that's when that was supposed to be in October, and so we graduated I think in July or so, right? And so we had a couple months, and that's when I was just like, you know what, like. And they didn't mention, right, if it's a Carnatic or if it's a contemporary sort of feel, what is it kind of, but they just kind of gave me an opportunity to perform there. And I was like, you know what, I've been doing all this like my whole year, why not explore, right? And try something out, from what I feel like I've learned. And and by then I kind of had a good collection of songs that I made also, right? And so I was like, I've also started composing like over the past 2.5 years. What if I play a couple of my compositions, and bring some of my friends over there and let them play some of their compositions? We'll all just play together and have the same vibe that we've had for the past year, and continue that, and not just stop there and say bye, like, right? So that's when I called two of my very, very dear friends, Jurek Miksinski. So he plays the sax. He's from Poland, and he plays Polish jazz. And my friend Hami Kivan from Iran. He's an Iranian, amazing, amazing. He's so amazing. He's an amazing pianist and composer and arranger and everything. And so we actually played a lot of songs together that whole year. I played on their songs, they played on my songs, and just jamming together and just practicing and learning so much from each other. And so I was like, let's three different worlds. It's like Carnatic music and Indian, Iranian classical and Polish jazz, and oh my God. And so I was like, let's look at what we can do, right? And so we actually graduated by the time I asked them if they'd be able to come over, and they said they'd love to come down. And so we didn't have a place to practice for the show until 2 days before the actual show, right? Because we're all in different countries. And then so they came like 3 days before. And my friends Vinod Shamanur and Sinadan were from Bangalore, and we the three of us were, as you said, right, initially Bahudari. We wanted to kind of play with them, and so we named the band Sanyog, which means confluence, confluence of sounds, confluence of worlds. And that's when we also got two other performance opportunities, one in Bangalore Bangalore International Center, as well as the Kerala Museum in Kerala, Kochi. And so that's the three of these shows. They were a super, like everybody really, really enjoyed because they said it was so fresh and so different from what they had been listening to, recent, like, the past couple of years. Like nothing like this really happened where, it was so global fusion. It was very different music from, it's very hard to explain, but I actually am going to release some of those videos from the concert tours very soon. Some of those songs were from my Intuition album and their songs as well. And so I wanted to release the studio version of the songs first, and then after the album, kind of release the tour. We planned to go on tour last year too, but because of COVID and everything, it was tough. But we're waiting to come back, and it was really wonderful. That's what really made me feel like it is possible to kind of bring worlds together, and but it's so important for that sort of relationship between the artists. You have to feel very comfortable with each other, to be able to bring it together. And I think the 1 year of playing so much with each other gave us that sort of comfort space to to be able to do it, because it's hard to just you have to let go. And just, it took me a while in the very beginning, but then after a while, when I really started to kind of just loosen up and just decide to kind of be a learner and learn and just do everything for the sake of just learning, and nothing else, right? No stress, no pressure of have to do it today, you have to do it right now, like just letting go of everything and being like, this is interesting to me, I love what I'm hearing, how do you do it, right? And so doing all of that for a while, because it's natural for me to have felt that way, I think, because I was playing so many kacheris and I was playing that sort of pressure, knowing that I have to execute, or I have to do it right, kind of gave, it was tough. And but then later, I think once we started to play more and then perform all these tours, and everybody really loved it. They said, you guys need to do this. And that also gave me so much more confidence, because I was like, okay, I'm going back to India and I'm going to be playing all this music that I have no idea how people are going to react, right? Because one, they've not heard stuff like this. Two, I haven't played stuff like this, three, but I think that's something that really made us feel like, wow, if people are enjoying this, and we're enjoying what we're doing, then let's just keep going. And yeah.
So yeah, all of these experiences sort of come down to this, which is your first fusion album titled Intuition. And
Yeah.
just on a general level, given the title, how sort of intuitive or instinctive was the creation of the album? And would you say it was a sort of culmination or melting pot of the intuitions and instincts of musicians from various cultures around the world?
Yeah, I think it really came down to, I didn't really have a plan when it came to how am I going to compose this song, or how am I going to, what is going to be the form, what is going to be the plan, right? I think ideas came randomly, things bringing pieces together, bringing parts together, sections together. Everything wasn't happening in this orderly fashion, where it was okay, this after this after. No way. In fact, I had no idea I'm even doing an album until I was just making songs in the beginning, and understanding how do you make a song, right? Which is not with a mridangam and not with a violin and a singer, literally, because every instrument you look at, be it a drum set, be it a just other percussion, or a harp, or a bass guitar, or acoustic bass, cello. Oh my God, I had no idea how to. It's not just saying, okay, play this line, right? You need to understand how it's going to blend together, and how do you compose in this sort of a vibe, and bring in. So because there was no sort of plan, because I was so confused that I had no idea how or what to plan, I just went with my ear, I went with my heart, and I just, I think the experience made it happen. And that's when I just instinct, and just emotion, feeling, and lots of the pieces that I made, there was a mood associated with it, right? When I felt something, when I felt emotional about, what's happening. Like that's when one of the songs I created, like Inner Voice, or when I felt like I'm exploring harmonies right now and I want to, have this Tilana format. Like that was a plan in terms of what I want to do, but how am I going to do it? I have no clue, right? But the pieces, would come randomly at really when I'm just running 300 minutes late to class. Like that's when the idea would come while running, like with like a 300-pound jacket on me. Like why would it come then? And then record it and go late, even more late to class. Like, these things would happen. And like, I think it's the experience. Like sometimes you won't realize when, things happen. It just slowly does. And, I remember my teacher telling me that there's no like rules when it comes to music. Like, yeah, there's, when you're really feeling something and when you feel like things are blending together, it's fine. Like go for it. And as much as I was learning, like that helped me feel safe to kind of express myself honestly too, because it's impossible to kind of be 100% like accurate when it comes to following a set of things coming from worlds you don't even know anything about, right? It's just been a couple of years of knowing something about it, but I think that's what made me kind of go with my intuition, my gut feeling, and my instincts, and my ear, most importantly, and my heart, and just enjoy. And of course, like my friends and peers, like people, the experiences that they've had coming together with the experiences that I've had, like we're all coming from the same world of wanting to kind of come together. And I think that's what that environment was what really pushed me into going like deep and being like, okay, it's okay if I mess up, or it's okay if it's not for we're just trying, we're just learning, we're just being ourselves, and with no sort of in like just kind of being like a little kid, where you're just trying to explore, you're trying to, that's all it kind of was ultimately. And I think that's what really helped. Yeah.
Kind of tying into the sort of emotion that you're talking about. When I first listened to the album, and I sent the album to one of my friends who's a
Mm.
jazz pianist, and like the first sort of thought that came for both of us was this is a very sort of emotionally driven album. You know, particularly maybe a song like Blossom, for example. Yeah, for me, it really felt like it was just certain feelings that were just being expressed in that
Yeah.
moment through music. And so, how do you think sort of emotion and rationality intertwined throughout the compositional process?
I think that's the main, like, that mainly really drove my everything, because, without feeling what you're doing, it's hard to do it, right? Like, and so I feel like, I think with Blossom, especially now that I'm so glad you mentioned, a lot of people also similarly told me that there was like a wave of emotions, like when you look at the song, right? Like it starts off, very calm and very like, um, and then it goes into like a very kind of scary zone, right? And then it goes into that sudden peak of like enlightenment, or some sort of, you know, thing that opens it up into like, oh, wait, it's probably not that bad anymore, right? And then it goes into this thing of calmness again, where it's like, it is what it is. And, that's how, things, it's about dealing with things kind of, and knowing that it's just acceptance and all of these, so many different feelings, right? So with Blossom, we kind of wanted this storyline, right? This is all that we planned. And the melody, of course, was, I composed and planned and everything. But, ultimately, like every take of the whole thing, like we took like, say, 5 or 6 takes. We took a couple minutes between, each take, and kind of, took a moment to kind of take a break and then go back to it. Every take was different. If like it's not the exact same planned take of like, oh, this note was wrong. If you actually listen to the recording, there's so many notes where I messed, like I'm not 100% on like on pitch or whatever, but it really was just feeling. And we both shared one microphone. It was not even like, we didn't even want to balance our anything, or it was just so raw and so like a one take thing. And we wanted to leave it, like that, because it's an experience. We wanted everybody to experience what we experienced. And I remember after that, whatever to take that, I think it was the last one, we, took 5 to 10 minutes after, and we didn't want to speak for a while. And then we just kind of, took a couple deep breaths, and then, we called it a day, because it's just, it's the experience, and the emotion is, most importantly, because we're musicians, we're artists, we emote, we have expressions, you never know what will ultimately happen, when you're playing, right? You can plan how much ever you want, you can tell yourself to play it right, or play it, play that Sangati because it sounds amazing, but whatever finally happens is just, it comes from the heart. And I think also because this was after a couple takes, we were also in the zone more, because we're used to the sound, we're used to the environment, and it was, I think that's how emotion really played a certain, I remember for another piece of mine, Inner Voice, I'm not sure if you heard, but that piece was at a point in time where I was, sitting in a practice room. There are like these really small practice rooms where you can kind of hear what people are practicing, I was so scared to practice, because I was like, oh my God, because people like doing their masters with me, like they've been studying these worlds of music, like from however long I've been studying Carnatic music. So imagine, like, what am I gonna like practice here on this piano when I've never practiced with a piano all my life, right? And that's when I just realized that, because I was sitting in front of the piano, I'm like, oh, so now I need to like know all these rules, and now I need to know I can't play wrong stuff, right? I'm gonna like wrong to do that. But then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sit down, like listen to all these notes, and listen to combinations of notes, and listen to what combinations I like, what I probably don't, what sound good together, and then just hum really softly and see, and that's how it started. And I remember I was so scared to even touch a note, right? But then because I didn't want anyone to hear me until, like, I had at least one line out, right? Like, it was just, what am I gonna do, right? But then after a while, when I sat for like, I cried, all of that happened for like the first 20 minutes, and this frustration and this anger, and that this, so useless, and all of these things happen. And then after like 45 minutes, I was like, you know what, okay, now that all that's done, now let's learn, right? And then I sat down, and then after about an hour or two after, then I didn't realize who's around me, what's around me. I started enjoying these sounds, and enjoying, my ears started liking things and not liking things, and I changed the combination of notes with, inversions, or like, I was like, okay, instead of sa ga pa, let me do ga pa sa, like let me just try these other like things. And then, I didn't think about anything, or any external thing, or why I'm doing this, or for what I'm doing. Let's just it's just me and music. And that's when I came up with that melody after like a couple, 2 hours, the da 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 dee da da. But with the chords, and the chords, actually, if you look at it, they're not really the voicings of my chords are not like actual like, they're just a bunch of notes. But
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
when I went to like my like jazz teacher's pianist, and I was like, so this is I've harmonized my song like this. And then they heard it, and like there was like, all of these notes together, like, which like, which is like, kind of like so many notes clashing,
Yeah.
but they loved it. And they said, like, it doesn't have to be a certain voicing. It doesn't have to be a certain voicing. It can be whatever you like. And when they heard that clash there, because my note was like, and I was doing like na, na, over that, and it sounded really spacey and nice, because it was covering what needed to be covered to fill that space up. And like all these things, like, and that's when they told me that the reason we're saying you don't need to follow any specific rules, no matter how much you know and understand, like when it comes to your music and you're doing this, is because your music is, it's not just about the music being different, but the line that you're creating is, it's everything is, subject, like it's not, there's no one fixed way. And to fill whatever space you want to compose, which can be on whichever note, right? Like anything can fill it. It's really about your ear, and maybe, yeah, you can ask a couple people if they like it too, of course, but ultimately that like that combination of notes, it just made me so happy and confident that I was like, I don't care if no one likes it. And that, I think, that feeling of that just touched me, like that felt complete, that felt like, yes, I want this, and that's when I started wanting to play more and being like, wow, can I make more sounds like these? And that's how, I think, inner voice kind of came into it. And then that's when I started playing, singing the solo part there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that all of that started happening in those practice rooms at that point in time. So I think, yeah, everything is very emotion based, story based, like experience based. And at that time, making that, like, it all depends on what's happening in your life at that time. Because it's impossible to be somewhere else and want to compose something of a different type, in some other space. You cannot do justice to that. And I didn't have the energy to do that either. So I think it was more of like, where am I now, and what am I feeling? And that's how it was.
Yeah, I'm just curious, based on, what you were talking about, did you still look at voicings in the context of Sarigama Padani? Or did was a major chord Sagapa for you rather than like CEG, for example, in
It
like your sort of
was.
creative
Yeah,
process?
yeah, absolutely. It is.
Mm.
But I'm very now, like, I started to understand that re is D, like ga is E. You got it, like know that. And then it took me a time to like transpose things sometimes and be like, okay, this is a new sagapa from say ga, and then it felt weird to play like gappa, like whatever, right? And be like, oh, but that's like, it's still in my head, it's sagappa of a new thing. But I had to start training because when I'm playing on the violin, I can't think like that because I would have to play other notes, right, and
Right, right.
transpose. So I exactly, like those were some of the challenges, but like I it was way better on the piano than on the violin, which is why there was a phase where for inner voice, I really didn't want to start composing starting from the violin. Like that's when I was like, I'm gonna sit with the piano this time, and let now that I can look at each note linearly, and like it's a very different way of looking at notes also, right? Horizontal rather than vertical. It's so many things, right? Like looking at when you're moving your hands around, and these you're looking at your pan positions, and everything's all different. Making you understand intervals better, like visually, and all of these things. I think that's what helped me feel more comfortable and just less frustrated for a while, especially. And it made me feel like, oh, it's actually just these three notes. It's not something like crazy. But on the violin, sometimes because it's fretless, or because you have other things happening, you tend to kind of here it was more clear, right, for me. And then I started to kind of make sense of what's happening and implement it in different scales more easily, and be like, okay, three notes, one, two, three, rather than, it's a smaller space on the violin. It's mentally just more, I think with all the history, I have to kind of be like, oh, I'm gonna go here now for a while, and then I'll bring it over there. But it gave me a clear mind space to kind of compose and feel like, more just free um, for a while. And that helped me kind of, and I started ever since then loving, I started to sing over chord changes easily like that. And then I started, not having to think so much about the transposing or anything while singing. And then when I would go to the violin, it would be a whole different story. But then I realized that it's fine, maybe I can just keep my violin to kind of, play the piece. But when I want to compose, I can always use the piano because it's helping me, open up my brain more, because it's hard to look at things on the violin when I've learned a certain way, especially when you can't, like, you don't have standard tuning. It's quite hard. But I think that's something that it's going to take, like, it's a lifelong thing. But it's something that I'm slowly like just getting more used to. And yeah, because the tuning is different, the everything's different. Yeah.
How were you able to map out the sort of harmonic elements of your pieces without a piano? Because I mean, I've read that Inner Voice was the first piece where you used the
Yeah,
piano in the compositional process. So
yeah.
yeah, so
Oh,
how
well,
were you?
I think I meant that like when I first sat to yeah. So when I compose say pieces like Tinky Winky or
Mhm.
even Ragamaya. Like Ragamaya was before I went to Berklee,
Yeah.
but Tinky Winky and Transcend and all these pieces were more like on one key. Like Tinky Winky was on one key, right? So it's like all on the form of the song. It's not like harmonically go like it's not there's no scale shifting and
Mm.
um things like that where I had to kind of it was just a very like free the voicings were fun, but it was just like the melody was like in one key, right? It's just like
Mm.
in a very abedi sort of like thing. But I think inner voice was when I wanted to kind of sit down and myself start making the piece with a piano. Like everything else, I started making the melody and then kind of voicing things. But this was like, I want to first figure out sounds that I like. And I want to stop depending my voicings on my melody. But I want to depend my melody on the voicings now. Like, I think that's what started to happen in Inner Voice because in the other songs like there was of course like merging parallels happened later, but I placed it like differently in terms of like mood and energy like for the
Mm.
album order. But when I made Inner Voice like before after the other pieces, that was kind of the first time I wanted to start looking at like like just harmony first and then putting the whole melody together because before my strength was like the melodies, right? Because
Mm.
my strength was not the harmony, and that's why I would depend. I then harmonize accordingly and like then take the best sounds that I like, and with the help of my professors and friends, and understand and be like, oh, this is why I like this better. Let's put this here. But then later for Inner Voice, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start the other way, and that's why I was so like scared to touch a note because I was like, oh God, I don't have the line, right?
Mm.
But yeah,
Yeah, so when you mentioned how merging parallels was placed before inner voice to sort of give a certain impact in terms of mood, I just wanted to lead that into asking about the sort of song order within the album and whether
yeah.
there was any sort of intentional impact that you wanted that to create on listeners.
Um, so initially, I didn't really compose all these pieces with an intent of kind of bringing it all under, one album name. But I think later as I started to want to do that because it all started kind of with Ragamaya, and I mean Apoorva Tilanas happened before Ragamaya, but that was very purely Carnatic, and
Yeah.
that was intent like that was like something like I really wanted to have like a nice. I loved making Tilanas and I wanted to make a couple, and that was intentional, and that was very purely Carnatic. But when I started to kind of this was when personally that journey of wanting to explore more started from Ragamaya, and that's when I was like, you know what? A couple months ago, I was like, this is all kind of a journey, and it makes sense to kind of come together because that's what it is, right? I don't want to. It's not separate moments of my life where I'm just like, oh, these are just seven to eight singles, but it's just how it all culminated into, it was a big journey that's just started actually, right? So that's how that kind of came into the thing. And when it comes to the order, I think some of the songs I don't know if they're all in the exact order of when I released them initially as
Mm.
singles, but I wanted to go mood based. And so, for example, the first piece that's Ragamaya, I think that was kind of a mood of like kind of wanting to explore, right? And then came Transcend,
Transcend. Yeah.
which the second piece, yeah. So that was like my first kind of collaboration at Berklee, and it was with a four-time Grammy nominee William Cepeda, who's the creator of Puerto Rican jazz, and so he kind of came as a visiting faculty, just kind of to like as a guest artist, and I happened to kind of I met with him, and I was like, I'd love to learn about your music, and that's when kind of this first original kind of collaboration happened, and I shared so many of my ideas and tunes, and I was writing little things, and that's when this came together, Transcend. And so actually I think Transcend would be more like a very exploring sort of mood, like, and Ragamaya we could say something that's more rooted, right? Because it just started right from there. So I think with that whole Grahabedam concept and kind of, I was still, it was very Carnatic based, like, intellect, like, so I think we can call that rooted. And then we went to Transcend, which was more like exploration. And then Blossom, I wanted to keep third because that kind of was when I started jamming more and getting deep, like getting closer to like the music, right? Like that's when I started to kind of really feel all these emotions and like feel more closer to like all these moods and all these bringing it right it like through like the music and everything. And so I'd say it was a very vulnerable time. It was very emotional. So I think that's more Blossom. And then I wanted to put in Merging Parallels because that's when I was, the emotional thing was great. But after that, I'm like, oh, now I'm pumped. And I'm like, wow, I love it so much. And I want to like, now I want to like, bring my Carnatic like flow with like a really like a Tilana sort of format with, like some nice harmonies. And, why not bring it to our world like in the most like some sort of an authentic way that I can try and bring like from my little, knowledge of what I know, right? And so I think that's more like very intellectual and very, that was a planned, what do I want to do, but it's not like how I want to do it that I know, right? So that, and then I wanted to put in Tinky Winky because it was, that's when I was starting to have fun with what I'm doing, right? And so it was kind of playful and, nice, like this nice jazzy jazz fusion vibe. And actually that song in Valencia, like we played it so many times, once with a nice big string section, once with the one that's on the album is with the horn section. And so it kind of went through like, playing Tinky Winky so much with my friends, like we were like, why don't we record this? And that was like a more playful sort of mood, and we were trying different things on different types of solo sections, different types of, each take was different. And I remember the final take that we chose was the one take we wanted to do without a click track, because every other one that had a click track was great and perfect, but it was like, you had to kind of have that all the time in your mind, and we weren't really feeling it, right? But then at the end, we're like, you know what? Let's not do it with the click. We already have what we want if we want, like, a great take, but, because we all love the song, let's just treat it as a live performance thing in the studio, right? And so we didn't do it with the click, and that turned out to be really the best take because we were all really free, and we didn't have to, like, listen to every little, like, and just really go with feel. And that's the one we chose. So I think that was like a more playful, fun, happy mood sort of thing. And then Inner Voice came into the picture where it was like, again, like, okay, now I want to kind of, I think I did Inner Voice a little before when I was composing, I'm just saying like order wise, but it was more heartfelt, right? Because it was something that I just decided to go with, even if, I actually didn't ask many people because I just loved it, the way it was, and everybody ended up really liking it too. And also I decided to kind of, I never wanted to kind of sing before and everything. So I was just like, oh, you know what, I'm going to hum because I feel like humming. And, it was that sort of a song where I started, with voicings rather than the melody. And then I started getting closer to the piano and harmonies, and harmony started becoming a sort of friend to me. And then I wanted to put in Valencia, which was actually one of the very last pieces that I composed, during my time there, because I was I was doing a lot of flamenco music. I was in a lot of flamenco ensembles and this and that, but I never really had time to compose something flamenco-y. And so I was like, you know what? I'm living in Spain. I love this music. And what am I doing? And let's start, listening to a lot of flamenco. And that's when that happened. And we brought in some like, rock sort of influences. And I think that was also like a very inspiration sort of mood. I'd say. Also, I felt a little more confident, right? Because I felt like, I think it's the confidence that I have, like, that are like roots, like we're able to take it like wherever we want to take it. Like, it's so rich and it has so much potential to just, share, like be shared with everyone else, and everyone loved, our music. And, that was, great. And the last song, Timeless, was also, that actually was the first song that I've ever composed, at Berklee. And that was the last song that I played at Berklee during the commencement concert.
Live, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, the live version. The studio version is different,
Yeah.
but the live version was, yeah, that was like the last. It was very beautiful because it was the first song that I remember sitting with my drummer Patrick on the couch in Berkeley, and I was like, that's when I really had no idea about any, and I was like, oh my God, like, and I was like, oh, how are we gonna put in a harp here? Like what, like how are we gonna do this, right? And so that's when I started, the sharing so many things about, what's Vagadishvari and like how, and then we were like, oh, it can be kind of jazzy, and like, and we were having all these ideas, and I was starting to understand like, all these terminologies on how to communicate my music and how to communicate all these ideas and say, come in here, do this, let's have like three hits over here, and like let's all these like things that I had no idea how to express, even though I knew it in my head like what I wanted to say, right? And it was the last song that we played, so we played it all throughout the year, so at so many events, and it was beautiful at the end because we're like, wow, this is where we really started. And that performance, it was just a feeling of wow, like I don't care how we do today or tonight, like whatever, we're just this is just our celebration of all that we've been through together. And just imagine spending a whole year with the same you know little lot of people like all that time, like, and really growing and just feeling that wow, like these people really helped me, like know a little bit more, whatever I that little that I've experienced is all because of these guys and all that they've kind of been through with me by my side, and playing my songs with me and supporting me and supporting our music. And it was so beautiful. So I think it was like a very like I'd say like unity and like that sort of a mood for the last piece. And so yeah, it's been a ride.
Yeah, just taking this on a sort of macro level. I've read in a lot of sort of interviews of yours that the sort of overall aim is to try and spread Carnatic music to the wider world.
Hmm.
So, how do you think this album sort of helps you do that, or at least
Yeah, I
starts to
think
help?
absolutely. I think one of the main things that I'm so happy like to do is that I'm able to kind of like a lot of people don't even know what Carnatic music is, right? And so but once they hear, like they're so like they're so fascinated and they're like so inspired. And yes, all of these songs from the album, they're not in the Carnatic format, or they don't have
Yeah.
that 100% sort of they have microtones, and they have influences, I would say, of like Carnatic or just Indian classical, sort of sounds and movements, note movements, and some are like even raga based sort of influences and different things, right? Even if it's like a small korve, or if it's like math thing or layam or some concepts or interlude, like trying to bring in wherever we can, whatever, like based on the feeling of everything. I think if this album is able to reach people like who've never heard Carnatic music, and they're like, wow, like let me go listen to this style of music a little bit more, because it's coming in all these different others, like it's coming into all these other contexts, right? Like in different ways. Like I think that was the goal of like me also wanting to explore the scope of kind of where can we go with what, like where it's always like when I think where can I go, it's just where can our roots go, like that's all it is, right? Because that's all I know and I'm made of. So I think being able to kind of sit in common grounds with people coming from different worlds in different ways, like maybe not, it's not like a exactly like this is Carnatic music, but trying to bring in influences and experiences together, if that's something that can help spread our roots a little bit to people who've really probably even never heard, that's something that I'd be so happy about.
This album is obviously a confluence of so many musically rich genres, and as a result, whether you intended it or not, it's a lot of the pieces are extremely complex musically. And
Yeah.
for the common listener, for people who aren't able to understand the intricacies and the sort of complex musical, rhythmic, and harmonic elements of the album, does it ever perhaps worry you that the complexity might be a barrier? And how do you bypass that barrier in order to directly reach a listener's heart?
I think, yeah, sometimes I do realize that, for instrumental music, especially, there's no lyric, there's no, story except for, what's being heard, right? The piece and the notes and the feeling and everything. But, I've really tried to, because it was it wasn't really intended to be like a doing this for an album and doing it. It was kind of the learning experience and just my like it everything kind of coming together. It might have been kind of like complex for some people to understand because that's where maybe our Carnatic concepts come into where like what is simple for us might not be simple for other people. What is simple for them might be very a very simple voicing for jazz musicians. For us, we're like, whoa, like what is that, right? Or like some crazy hits or something that for them it's just like, oh, this is just normal, like we do this all the time, right? But I feel like um yeah, I don't I I I just like I went with feeling, like just feeling and emotion, and I didn't intend to do be like, oh, let's make this really complicated, because that whatever like for me, what was complicated genuinely would probably be simple for everyone else, which is just probably just normal harmony and normal voicings and really just normal arranging and normal instrumentation, and that was really really hard for me. So, and the easy part was like the little chords or like the little the hits and the offbeat stuff, or those things were not hard for me. But I feel like for listeners, like I would love it if they just don't worry about all of that and just go with the feeling and the mood of the song and how it makes you feel. And what I like about the fact that it doesn't have lyrics is that anybody can interpret it in whatever they way they want, right? Like it you can create your own story, like envision what you want to envision. Like people, when I first, before releasing the album, when I sent some of my best friends some of these songs and saying, I said, like, what does it make you think of, like, or what does it make you feel? Because all the videos are kind of just us playing either like the studio version or like me just playing, but there's no like big story to it. Because the truth is, like when I was making it and everything, it didn't have a big story like, or a plan. It was just my learning experience and my just experience playing with all these people. And I think it was more of a musical experience for me than like us anything else. So I think for people to just listen to it and think of whatever they like, whatever makes them feel, like what it makes them feel, right? I've heard a lot of people say that Tinky Winky makes them feel kind of happy, or it's just like a fun thing. Or even like inner voice, people say it's very calming and soothing to have in the background when they're working, or just enjoying, or even transcend, having like a nice kind of groovy. And Ragamaya also having so many like not thinking about, oh, this Grahabedam, this scale shift, this thing went into this, how did this go from which note, but just being like, oh, enjoying it from not having to worry about the things I'd have to worry about. Because if I had a choice, I'd love to listen to things like, without all these thoughts. But when you have to make the music, you have to think of all of this. So I mean, just having, just enjoy, and I just hope, and it's a huge learning experience for me. So I'm sure, like, since this is the start, I'll start to explore more into like, stories and more, planned things that, even making things maybe sound more seamless or a little more simple or more like having different types of vibes and moods. Yeah, I'd love some feedback and some, I'd love to know how people are, how they feel about these pieces and stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, Intuition has just released, and the next few weeks will probably be spent, promoting that, and maybe doing similar interviews like this one. But sort of after that, or is there anything that you're planning to work on, or perhaps you're working on already? Are there any future releases that we can look forward to?
Yeah, I think as you said right now, I'm kind of taking some time to kind of, talk about the album and kind of spread it. And I hope a lot of other, music lovers and people really just share it with their friends and listen and let me know how they feel and everything because it's all very new to me. It's a very new sound. It's a process. And I'd love to kind of take these inputs and because it's also important about like how people feel, right? Like it's also about that connection, not just me and music, but it's like the listeners and the people who are listening who love listening to music, not even my music, right? It's all one. So all of that really matters to me as to how to kind of create more pieces and because I'm still, it's starting off and but this is something I'm really happy and proud of because it's just very raw. It's just coming from, a very messy, raw place, right? But also with all my like it's I think if I make anything else like in the future, nothing can be as raw as this, right? Because it's really coming from my heart and my ears and my instinct rather than my knowledge or my planning and my this will sound good. I had no idea. Like this was more of like I think this resonates with me and I think I really enjoy this and that sort of like rawness is what that's why I'm so excited to know how people feel too. Yeah.
So that's sort of approaching the end of this interview, and at the end of every podcast that I do, I
Yeah.
ask the same final question.
Yeah.
And that final question is I'm particularly interested in your answer given the sort of explorative nature of all of your music, particularly over the past few years. But the question is, what's on your playlist right now?
Oh my God, you will not believe, but some Christmas music actually.
Just around 2.5
Yeah, I
months
know.
too late.
I'm so late right now. Yeah. I haven't been listening to a lot lately because I've kind of been working on a lot of, post-production and the album release and everything. So I really didn't have any time to listen to anything but the same 8 songs over and over again to, the mastered versions and the mixed versions and oh my God, but I would love some good recommendations for now I'm free, so I'm ready to listen to some good stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then I suppose what sort of music do you generally listen to in your free time? Is it still very Carnatic inclined or
Yeah, that for sure. And also I think I've been listening to a lot of my friends' music, and from, and some of my, like a lot of music that my teachers at Berklee have recommended me to listen to, for compositional inspiration. And, I've been listening to a lot of John McLaughlin and Shakti, music. And, he's been guiding me. He's been so, he's been a lot of like harmony related thing and inspiration. It's all coming from that side and from him. And I think listening and just kind of trying to interpret and practice and compose like without just you have to just do it to start kind of getting into it, but kind of listening to some I've been listening to some jazz music and some Carnatic and some flamenco, Paco de, like a lot of, yeah, people, Bill Evans. Like I've been, like, there's no like end to it really. And I feel like I'm just open to listening to anything because, like, I think this experience at Berklee has given me that passion, because I have so much respect for every form of music. I know how rich it can be. Like I cannot imagine, like really, like, and so yeah, I'm open to listening to anything. Honestly, I don't have like a, particular. Yeah, as I said, right now it's Christmas music, which is very late, but yeah,
All right,
yeah.
so on that note, I think we'll finish off there. Thank you so much for your
All right,
time, and thank you to the
thank
listeners for
you.
tuning in. Make sure to go and check out Apoorva's music, and particularly her new album, Intuition, and her social media in the description below. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much.
Well, that was Apoorva Krishna on our 8th episode of the Indoencers podcast. And thank you to everyone that has tuned in. You can find us at the Indoencers, spelled THEINDOENCERS, on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or you can use the links in the description. Likewise, you can find our homepage at theindoencers.wordpress.com or through the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the Indoencers podcast on your favorite podcasting platforms. Thank you once again, and we'll see you next time.